This is episode 13 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, TJ and I discuss our favorite Second Doctor adventures. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and I'm joined again with TJ for our first installment of the Second Doctor.
Hey everyone, I'm back to talk about Doctor Who again, as if that's shocking.
No one who knows us should be shocked at all. We are currently working our way through the third Doctor and Joe, but we won't spend much time on that because that's not this episode. We'll start with the recommendations.
Where we are.
And
Spencer, what is your recommendation for this time?
So it's been interesting mental health month for me, we'll say. And so I've defaulted to my childhood favorite, Digimon. I could watch almost any of the Digimon series and get a little bit of a nostalgia dopamine kick, but especially the first couple seasons, the nostalgia's been good for my mental health. And I know your kids were more into Pokemon, but
my son loved Digimon when he was younger.
Really?
He really did.
Okay.
I didn't watch it. He's usually watching it when I was at work, I think.
Yeah.
About 3 or 4 he really liked Digimon.
Yeah, I knew he liked Pokemon, but I did not know
He did. Yep.
But I guess if he was 4, then that was probably before I knew you. Because I think he was 8 when I met you.
No, he was 5 when you met me.
Yeah. They're getting too big anyways. That's all.
My kids are getting old. Yep, that's all there is to it.
Yep.
No, but he liked Digimon, and well, I didn't know you liked Digimon when he did. Like I don't think we had that conversation. So
no,
regardless of
we
whether
talked
or not,
about Doctor Who, not about what your kids watched.
Exactly, because I was sick about talking about what my kids watched because there was a lot of other things in there mixed in with the Digimon. Anyway, moving on.
Your recommendation is?
My recommendation is Australian Survivor. For those of the uninitiated, yes, the TV show Survivor, there is an Australian version. It is hosted by Jonathan, I can never pronounce his last name, Lob something or other. Lob, yeah, that's gonna bug me so badly now. I'll get it. Anyway, La Paglia. He's an Australian actor. He was in a few things. His brother is famous for being on Frasier, as well as he was the main character on Without a Trace. But Jonathan, I think, is his slightly younger brother. Jonathan hosts this show, the Australian Survivor. He does a good job. He gives his own feel to it. It's got its own twists and turns. Depending on which canon you go with, which is odd because it's Survivor, but there was an initial Survivor back in like early 2000s, and then for Australia, and then it didn't work out. They did another one, and it didn't work out. So the third time, this is its, I think, 10th or 11th season of its current installment with this host and this format. It's a little slower than American Survivor. There's 24 instead of 20 or 18 people. So it's a longer show, but it's really enjoyable. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's fun to hear different accents. So it's just my thing. I've always been been a Survivor fan, and I've added in Australian Survivor, and going to continue watching it. It comes back on next week and they air 3 a week, which is kind of a weird thing. Sunday through Tuesday. And they have 24 people, and they air it, I think, for like 7 weeks.
Oh wow.
So it's really, I really enjoy it though. It's different. It's like the same thing but different enough that it has its own feel. So more of the same but different enough. A lot of these reality shows, I mean, like Big Brother, which started in the UK and then came over to the US, but it's got the US format is vastly different than the UK or Australian format from what I hear, and
I just can,
Canada has its
I don't think
own.
I'll
So.
ever be able to think of reality TV without thinking of the Ninth Doctor.
Okay, moving on. That was enough
Here,
of my
that was my poor
Survivor.
segue into Doctor Who.
Yes, that was bringing
So,
us back on topic somewhat. With the Ninth Doctor, now we got to go backwards even further in time to the Second Doctor. Although with one of the stories, you won't go that far back in time.
wibbly
So
wobbly.
just a reminder for everyone, Spencer and I each choose 5 stories, and pretty good about having things line up. So we
Yeah,
each have
we,
three
we tend
that
to get along
we
with
have
our appearance, with our interests and stuff. So we
we have
have
3 that match, and then 2 that
four that
don't.
match.
4 that match. Did I
Yeah,
miss
the
that?
my final
Yeah,
choices ended up being four that matched, and then we both had one that.
1 that didn't match. So we'll go through 6 episodes this time, or 6 stories, not
Yep.
episodes, stories.
So, and unlike last time when we did the first Doctor stories, and we took an hour to do it because we kept talking and talking because it's Doctor Who and we love
Doctor Who.
talking.
Yeah, we're pretty vain like that.
Yeah, we like to talk about Doctor Who, so we could go for a while. I'm gonna set a timer for myself, and we're gonna try to be as succinct as possible, which would be a challenge for us.
Yes, it will.
You ready?
Yes. This is like a race now. Now I'm like
Yeah,
very
right.
invested
So I'm gonna
in
give
it.
myself 3 minutes to talk about the Highlanders. That was on, it was one of the, it was the one that's just on my list. And honestly, there are two big reasons that I enjoyed it. Three, if you count the fact that it was Jamie's first episode and our first story, and he was the long-term companion of the Doctor, the second Doctor, and like the first of the Doctor's like best friends, so to speak. I know, although we kind of mentioned that Stephen and the first Doctor kind of had that dynamic as well, but
But Jamie, it's a lot stronger.
yeah, yeah, on a lot longer too.
Yep.
Um, but we'll talk more about Jamie in our next episode when we talk about the
Yep.
companions. But the
But what is it
historical
about the
aspect,
Highlanders you like? Go ahead. Yep.
well, it's just the historical aspect of it, and I wrote about this in the blog, but it's just like that when Doctor Who was created, it was meant to be like a historical, like educational show. And I think I mentioned this when we talked about the Romans as well, that these the historical episodes, at least in of the modern era, I've a lot of them I was like, man, it's all right. Um, but the Highlanders and the Romans intrigued me to the point that with the historical aspect that I was intrigued to know more about that era. So, have I done any research on that time period since? Nope, because I've got too many other things on my to-do list. But it still like intrigued me and piqued my curiosity, so I'll take it.
So
It's
what
still
else about that besides it being Jamie's first episode? I mean, you got to remember for those who don't might not know perfectly, it's a missing episode, a lost episode,
oh, that's
and it's
true for
also and it's Ben and Polly are still with the second Doctor, and this is only their second story with the second Doctor.
yeah. So, and but the other thing I like about this one is just that like the whimsy of the Doctor that we know today kind of started to come out. There was even a couple lines of the second Doctor saying things like, "Ooh, I would like a hat like that." And if any fans of the modern era could think of Matt Smith and the half a dozen different kinds of hats that he wore, I think that fits right in line with the character of the second Doctor. So I guess that's the biggest thing is it showed the Doctor's whimsy, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I love that he
and
loves the hats.
there's my timer.
That's your timer. Okay. Well, then that means we have to move away from the Highlanders, which I
Unless
didn't
you have
mind the
any thoughts
Highlanders,
on
but it's not my favorite. It to me my downside is that Jamie was an accidental companion. Like I didn't like and I like the companions having like a good introduction, and Jamie is the main character in that story, and then they're like, "Hey, we like you. We're gonna keep you around." Like it, he could have
I,
walked in the TARDIS, or he could have not walked in the TARDIS. That was kind of how it felt at the very end there. And it
still better
just
than Dodo.
Yeah, let's not talk about the worst exit and worst entrance combined. Um, but anyway, that was just the one downfall is I was hoping for a little bit more from Jamie's first episode.
And
But
the story doesn't exist in its entirety right now, so maybe
nope.
someday.
And if it ever does, I'd listen to it again. But I'd want to watch it if that ever was a possibility out there.
Agreed.
The next story is from mine, and so this is the one that is mine and not
And
Spencer's.
for anyone missing, anyone that didn't listen to our first Doctor episode, our first Doctor Stories episode, we're going in release order.
Yes, we're
Trying
not
to keep it
ranking
within
them.
the
We're just
Doctor's. Yeah, this is the Doctor's timeline.
the Doctor's timeline. Um, and so I mean that. So it just so happened that Spencer's was early of the second Doctor. Mine is kind of middle of the second Doctor of the following season. Season 5, story 4, The Enemy of the World, which
Taking
I
place in the
I
distant future
of the distant future of 2018, that distant 6 years ago. When it was released, it was 50 years in the future. So, I mean, that is kind of a cool thing about it. I kind of thought that was a funny aspect because there's a lot of new age travel in that. They can go from Australia to Europe in an hour. I think it was Australia to Austria in 1 hour. It felt like, and I'm thinking that's a really impressive flight you got going on there.
I mean,
I mean, the doctor could do it, but
plane tickets to Utah, and it'll still take us a couple hours to fly from Texas to Utah.
yeah,
So
I just flew to and from Atlanta last week, and so it was 3 hours and something on the way there, and almost 4 hours on the way back. So, I mean, I got to watch
we
some
still got
movies,
some work to do.
but to get to Australia in an hour, well, I mean, Europe in an hour, that would be even from the US to Europe. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so 2018 in this like almost cyberpunk dystopian setting, like it's got a lot of future technology, like I said. The the travel was a big deal, but also on the flip side, it's like a destroyed society that's being taken over by a man named Salamander, who is portrayed by Patrick Troughton, who is also known as the Second Doctor. So
The
he plays the good
first,
guy and the bad guy.
one of the first Doctor Gingers.
Yeah, well, so second Doctor Ginger, because the first Doctor had one too.
Yep. The
I think
Abbott.
it's on the audio. Massacre of Saint Bartholomew's, or no, the other one.
No, that's right, because I did a
Yeah,
whole blog post on the Doctor Gangers, so I
yeah.
remember that.
So there he does have one. Anyway, moving on. So seeing Patrick Troughton, who is this like Spencer, like you were saying, he's this very whimsy doctor, and now he's playing this flat out evil.
Such a good job
Um,
playing evil.
and he did a really good job playing evil. And there's a downside with with who his race is in it, but kind of neither here nor there. In the fact that he's playing the guy who looks just like him, and he really did a good job of playing evil, and then having them switch places a couple times, um, was kind of a cool thing. I thought there was also some good Jamie protects the Doctor, some early in a much later episode, River Song refers to the Doctor as the damsel, and so it's always nice it's always funny when seeing the companion protecting the Doctor. And also one of my other favorite things on it, I did not start my timer, dang it.
I started your
But
timer and I started it
uh,
late. You got 50 seconds left.
sweet. So my final piece about this episode or the story that I love is Salamander. It's a spoiler, from an episode that's really super
50
old.
years ago, it's fine.
50 years ago plus 56 years ago plus it has been in existence or recaptured or found or whatever from the depths of wherever it was hiding.
The depths of the time
It,
vortex.
it was a lost episode until 2013. So you've had 11 years to watch it and about 20 years to listen to it. And if you're
You
old
have
enough,
to know that if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to get Doctor Who spoilers from classic
that
Doctor
is
Who at this
absolutely.
point.
So at the very
So
end of this story, Salamander sneaks into the TARDIS, tries to pretend he's the Doctor. Doctor makes it in there in time, of course, and they take off, and the doors are open, and Salamander falls out into the vortex of time or whatever it is. And I don't know why, but to me that was one of the cooler villain deaths.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that it's ever happened before or since. I mean, I
I mean,
guess
they are
Captain
very
Jack
careful about
died
the
in
story.
the time vortex, but then Captain Jack came back.
Captain Jack was a different death, though.
Captain Jack was
Um,
Captain Jack.
yeah, moving on. So
But
that
that
is
leads directly into the next story that we have, though.
it. Really does. That is the
And I'm going to give us 5 minutes to talk about this one because it's one of on both of our lists.
both our lists.
So we've got the Web of Fear.
Which is immediately following the enemy of the world. Like when the previous
The
story
time
ends,
vortex is still, or Salamander has just fallen into the time vortex.
yep.
And then the TARDIS comes out in modern day, uh, well, in space, I believe, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know that they end up on Earth in at the time modern day, which would be
Mhm.
1968.
But I think at first
Um,
they land in space, and that's
they
when they
do.
start to notice things are wrong, but I don't remember all the details.
Go ahead. Why don't you talk about what you like about it though? And I'll
So
look up
it's
what
the
I can.
first appearance of, well, he wasn't the Brigadier at the time, but we got the first appearance of the would-be Brigadier, who was a major player throughout the rest of classic Doctor Who, and his legacy with Kate Stewart has gone through modern Doctor Who as well. So it's a unit before it was unit, I think, and
Yeah, he's not unit at that
it's
time.
a. But I mean, obviously, the character was loved enough that they gave him a recurring main cast role for years afterwards, and then recurring after that.
I mean that is the interesting thing is like for the second Doctor,
He's
he
only got a couple stories with the Brigadier,
he's only got one more story. I mean, after this one,
three if you count the
and
five Doctors, because he's the
I don't.
companion in the five Doctors for the
Yeah, I
second
still don't
Doctor.
count it. I'm not counting it. Um,
Wibbly wobbly.
nope. I have a hard time counting those in a certain aspect. I do count them. I only count them from that doctor's perspective.
I know.
But that's me. So yeah, I mean, he only really got those stories with the Doctor, and so just such a great introduction, I think, though, because if you didn't know, they do a really good job at. There's a mystery element in Web of Fear that I like, and you don't know who the villain is until the end, and if you've watched Doctor Who and you know who Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart is, then you know that he's not the villain. But
Mhm.
you didn't know and you start at the very beginning, you have no idea. And it's kind of a cool aspect of it. It makes it harder from the mystery. I love a good mystery. Have everybody, I mean, I write mystery. That's what my novel is. Um,
By the way, TJ has published his first novel, so
I know I
gonna
said it that way.
shamelessly plug that for him because he's needs the prompting to plug it for himself. But
Yes, I have
now we
written a
return to
novel.
Doctor
That
Who.
is not my recommendation. Spencer needs to read it so it can be his recommendation. I can recommend my novel all I want, but
Done. Well, not done. I will.
he's not done.
I haven't bought it
Um,
yet. I'm a bad friend.
Nah, that's because he's coming to Utah, and I'll just sign one to him. That way, it's easier for him to buy it
Yes.
from me. Um,
Okay.
so I
The
like the
web.
mystery aspect, but it's lost a little bit because I know it's not Lethbridge
Mhm.
Stewart. Like I know it's not the Brigadier who's the bad guy, and so it made it easier to figure out who it was. But it was really still a cool thing to see him. This is his introduction to um to see, but it's not just the Brigadier as being the only recurring personality that you're seeing in the Web of Fear, though, is it?
No, we got another appearance of the Yeti after the Abominable Snowman, um, which wasn't on our list, but that's okay. Um, but we also got the reappearance of the Great Intelligence, who if you're a fan of the modern Doctor Who era, just like the Brigadier, you knew who he was going in. The Great Intelligence you saw throughout the 11th Doctor era, especially his time with Clara.
Yeah,
Um,
with Clara,
the
that seven
Snowman and the Bells of St. John and the Name of the Doctor.
name of the Doctor. Those are the three with the great intelligence.
Just there were a lot of, honestly, with those Great Intelligence episodes, there were some callbacks to this story.
Yep.
So if you enjoyed those, like going back to here, I mean, the 11th Doctor had mentioned the London Underground being a key piece of conquering Earth, and that's where this story takes place.
Yep. I also love the if I remember correctly of the since it's a 6 episode story, first episode I want to say ends somehow with the Doctor by himself in the middle of the underground, and it's supposed to be about to be exploded or something. And I'm just like, why did he tells everyone else not to walk off, but he of course can go walk off. That's the Doctor for you. And it's just always funny how quickly, like, hey, we got to somewhere new, don't walk off. Everybody starts walking off, and it's just like a
Naturally.
classic moment of it.
Okay, moving on to the Mind Robber. That it's a little bit of a different one. It's a little fairy tale fiction world, um, hinting towards other universes, which I'm curious how that would all fit into the Fourth Doctor and the E-space and everything. But we're not talking about the Fourth Doctor yet. That will be an adventure. Oof.
Yes.
That's gonna be like 8 episodes instead of 4. We
We'll
haven't
talk
really
about the
decided
Fourth
yet.
Doctor later. We have there's plenty to talk about the Fourth Doctor and plenty of time to talk about him.
Yes.
But with the Mind
Um,
Robber, because of the way that Netflix was back in like 2014, the Mind Robber was the only second Doctor. Well, can't say only, but it was the only second Doctor era story that was on Netflix at the time. So it was the first second Doctor story that I had ever seen.
yeah, they just decided like pick and choose which stories were contracted to Netflix
Yeah.
or something.
It was really weird because it only had like one episode, one story from the first Doctor, one from the second, and I can't remember. I want to say that the next
It was like two
story
or three of like everyone else or
there were like
something.
there were like two from the third Doctor, and then I didn't watch
It
much
was
on. I
weird.
think it left Netflix, but yeah, but the Mind Robber was the first second Doctor story I watched, and I really liked Jamie and Zoe. So now we've in the previous two stories that we talked about with Enemy of the World and Web of Fear, they were Victoria as the the third part of the hardest party. With Mind Robber, we now have Zoe, which I believe this is her third story with them. Well, second story traveling with them, but third story
Right.
overall. So I really liked her character in this one. Zoe gets in a fight with I don't remember what
It was with
monster
the
it is,
Muscle
but
Man.
Muscle Man, she takes him down. And just like this
No
short
damsels in
little like
distress here.
16-year-old girl. The damsel that's in distress is the Doctor again.
I thought I was just saying the Muscle Man was the damsel in distress.
Yeah, the Muscle Man was the damsel in distress. It reminds me of that scene from Scooby-Doo when the Scooby-Doo movie when Daphne takes out the wrestler. Like, who's the damsel in distress right now? And punches him down through the ceiling.
I
It's
was
kind of
thinking of Meg from Hercules. My damsel, I'm
yep,
in distress. I can handle this.
yep. That same I think Zoe could handle her own just fine. And Zoe to me is like the first companion who could really handle her own.
Physically
Which we
and
can go back to we can
intellectually.
go back to that later, but and this story really showcases that on both levels, I think.
Well, it's really interesting is that we also have this like comical recasting of Jamie for like one
Oh my God.
episode. Cause, and I looked this up,
Yeah, I did
his
too.
nephew had chicken pox, I think, or so he's
I
like
thought he had it. Depending on, I guess
he
depending on which
contracted it from his nephew. is
Yes,
what I read.
he had contracted chickenpox
So they just cleverly recasted him, just like
for
they,
one episode.
yeah, which only in the land of fiction would that have worked. Um,
Exactly. Like this is the story where they could get away with it.
yeah, and it's just like how in the toy maker that they subtly took the first Doctor out of the equation while he was on vacation.
He went on vacation. I know it was the same idea. And it's
Just,
just
just working into the story.
such a funny random way. I mean, like Jamie gets put into pieces, and the doctor tries to put his face back together, and it
And he did it
ends up with
wrong.
a he did it wrong, and he got this other dude. And wait, are you Jamie? And like yes, I'm Jamie. Did not sound like Jamie at all, but and
I
didn't look
don't
like
remember if his
Jamie. But
accent was right.
I can honestly not remember. I want to say he sounded Scottish enough, but it was funny. It was weird, but it worked. I think it worked still. It was Doctor Who, so they can almost make anything work, I think. But
I will say,
um,
being fans of the modern series first, when there were mentions of the intelligence and the master, I had
yep,
to stop and think, wait, when did the master first appear? Wait, am I forgetting about a great intelligence episode? Um,
yep.
but no, it was a, I can't call it a red herring because those concepts weren't
There
really,
was no such thing as the Master yet. The Master,
yeah,
we only have had
the
the
monk.
monk. Thank you. I'm like, it's not the friar, the monk. We only had the monk as another member of the Gallifreyan race.
But no,
So
it was so it threw me off,
it's really kind
but
of
it
cool.
was so it was even better in a way that like, wait, the master is not the renegade time lord. It's like
No,
this entity inside the land of fiction.
I mean, it could be a future version of the Master that he just didn't know, but I don't think it would have worked. I
Oh.
don't even think that works very well there.
I like your timeless
So,
child theory about the master better than that
oh
one.
yeah, I maintain that the Timeless Child is the Master, not the Doctor, but that's me.
We'll get to that one
Um,
eventually.
yeah, unfortunately. I
Long,
mean,
long ways away. No,
I
we'll
know we have a
have
long way.
we got time.
We got
Um,
time. But yeah, you got that like weird. It's not even a red herring because they weren't trying. Although with the intelligence, there was. We've already had the intelligence. We just talked about the intelligence in the previous story that we're talking about. So it was kind of a funny, weird use of a term that has already been used and one that was about to get used a lot more.
yep, yep. Um, but it was just this I don't know, it's such a unique concept for Doctor Who. It's as many unique concepts as Doctor Who had at that point. It was still unique, even
Mhm.
still, even further still.
And
And
now today it still has a unique place. Like it's because they're in a whole other universe, which people don't recognize as being in universe of Doctor Who. I did quotes if you didn't hear me do the air quotes on
you
that,
didn't
people.
hear his air quotes?
You didn't hear my air
Nice.
quotes? I don't know what's wrong. I'll have to turn on the mic louder. But with that other universe, like the whole concept of the timeless child, as well as the celestial toy maker, they come from other universes, and so that is what this story does point out that it already exists. So anybody arguing against that, it's already in the lore there. But you do have a cool question that looked like you wanted to ask at one point.
Yeah, I mean, we're already up on our 5 minutes to discuss the mind
Oh, whatever.
robber, but
We'll finish with that.
what would you like to be in your world of fiction? I think you'd have like some kind of Sherlock Holmes or mystery detective, but
I would have Hercule Poirot
I
from
don't know.
Agatha Christie.
Okay, I was like, I don't know who that
Agatha
is.
Christie. Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, A Haunting in Venice. Those are three recent movies that star Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot. So it was for Halloween that year with the mustache and the hat. But I also want a Janet from The Good Place. My world of fiction has to have a Janet in it.
See, my brain somehow heard Janice from
Nope.
Friends.
That is what my kids mix up those two names all the time because we watched The Good Place
Janice.
last year and we've been watching Friends for a while and they keep like mixing up Janice and Janet and I'm like no I want a Janet in my world Because then I can ask anything I need to ask, and then I can be handed everything I want. What would you have in your world of fiction?
Knowing the kind of stuff I watch is some mix of superheroes and
I mean, there's a
uh,
TARDIS in both of them. Let's get it. Come
well,
on.
yeah, but I think that's too easy of an answer for the two of
Right.
us.
Yeah.
But superheroes and some kind of other sci-fi like Star Wars.
I mean, my
So
world of fiction, that's just the start. I mean, by all means, I would have to
yeah,
have the Enterprise and well, Picard's Enterprise, and then you know, plenty of Batman going on with that as well.
yeah, you'd have plenty of Batman.
DC. But now we can go on to our next story.
Yeah, speaking of going back to talking about the Great Intelligence and the Brigadier,
Hmm.
we have the Invasion, which I bring up the Great Intelligence again because I kept thinking, okay, we've got the Brigadier again, and I don't think there's another Great Intelligence story here, but I kept thinking with how the story was progressing that the Great Intelligence is going to pop up again, but it wasn't the Great Intelligence.
I'm gonna be a really bad Doctor Who fan for a second here. This is a Cyberman story, right?
Yes,
Okay.
but the whole
I
like,
I I
and I
I didn't
kept
want to
having
mix it. I kept mixing it up with one of the other
no, and,
stories
and that
that I
was the
don't
thing was
like.
that I knew that the Web of Fear was the last Great Intelligence story, but I kept having this idea going through my head of just with how the story was playing out, and maybe it's just because the Brigadier was in both that
I
I
would have
kept
liked it better if
feeling,
it was the Great Intelligence. I mean, I still liked it well enough to keep it up there, but
but it
I
threw me for a loop that like I'm expecting the Great Intelligence. I think I even well, I mean I've seen it before, so I knew that it was Cyberman somewhere in the recesses of my brain, but it threw me for a loop because had I been watching this as a new viewer, I really would have been thinking the Great Intelligence, and
well, and
instead
honestly,
there's a
it could have been
villain that
either
came out of
one.
nowhere.
Yeah. It easily could have been either one, given the way that the story is written, and also given what the Great Intelligence was in connection to the Yeti in previous stories. We kind of mentioned that he kind of controls them in the Web of Fear. It wouldn't have been a far-fetched idea that the Great Intelligence is somehow controlling the Cybermen.
That'll
So
be a
I would,
topic to
I mean,
maybe address when we do our villains episode.
yeah, and but
Crossover of
again,
the
I mean,
Cybermen and the Great Intelligence.
I mean, it wasn't necessary, and by no means. Uh, the one of my big downsides of the invasion though is once again idiots think they can control Cybermen. It's a constant Doctor Who flaw
I
of
mean,
humanity.
this was a. I bring this up just because of that comment and the fact that this was the first episode or the first story to officially include Unit and
Yep.
the Brigadier as the Brigadier.
Yeah.
Um, but I swear, with where we are in the third Doctor era right now, that's like a recurring thing. The Master keeps thinking he can make deals with these other races, and lo and behold, it blows
I
into
know. I
his
can't wait
face.
to talk about that in the villains for the third Doctor.
That's going to be a while, so we're going to have some fun in the meantime.
Yep, we definitely are. But
I forgot to
I
set the
don't have
timer for
much
that
else
one,
about the
but oh,
invasion. I'm good with the invasion. I liked it. I think it was good, but it's probably if I were to rank my top five here, it's definitely it's in that fifth spot. I
and
think it's
if I
very
recall correctly, was this a 6 episode story or eight?
seven. It's a
Yeah,
weird 7-1.
yeah, too many. And just like in the third Doctor era at the beginning, there was a lot of
Seven
7 episode
episodes.
stories, and it was just too much. I really am a much bigger fan of the 4 episode story arcs.
Four is my favorite. I can handle six.
Yeah.
Um, but seven was pushing it. And despite this still being in the top, and we're gonna get into one that's even longer in a moment
Oh,
here.
yes. Moving
This
on
I'm
from the
sorry, I was wrong.
invasion.
This was an 8
I was right. It
episode.
was 8. Okay.
It was 8. I was thinking 7 for some weird reason, but it was long. It felt very long
It's
too.
because of
But I,
that first part of the third Doctor.
yeah, there's
So
so
many
much.
sevens.
So we can go on
But
to,
speaking of long, long stories,
I know,
and
which is funny that it's still
I
not
did
top
not think
5.
this one would be on my list because the first time I watched it was on a grave shift and had complete mind, like brain fog throughout it all. Um, which actually plays into the first episode of the
And
War
it has.
Games. So, because
I
the War
I
Games was so many episodes,
it
but it
was
was
10
actually,
episodes.
I was actually really impressed watching through it this time that I only ended up, I was folding laundry during this, so I didn't make notes about every
That was
episode.
a lot of laundry.
Well, over the course of couple weeks or whatever, you know.
I'm just teasing
Um,
you.
it does feel like that much laundry though sometimes.
Yeah.
But like each
But
episode
when
had
you're
like
folding
something.
laundry, yeah.
Each episode has like had like its own distinctive plot and like, which I was surprised because it seems like a lot of these classic Doctor Who stories, it's like a 6 episode plot instead of each episode being its own plot.
Yep. I mean, with this one, I know I'm gonna have it wrong here, but episodes 9 and 10, the last two of the story, feel like they could have been their own. They
Mhm.
were almost their own story. Especially that 10th episode really stands out on its own. And
And
the
that's when
first
we
eight,
finally got the first real mention of Time Lords as Time Lords and Gallifrey
yep.
as Gallifrey.
There's a lot in this episode because you do have your second, the first time that the second, okay, the only time that the second Doctor during the second Doctor's era runs into another Time Lord.
Mhm.
You have the war. Oh my gosh, there's two with the war, and one is the Gallifreyan and one is not. He is
There's
the
like the
war.
war chief, and then there's a
He's the
Time
war
Lord
chief,
that
not the warlord. There's a warlord, but the warlord is alien, not alien to both Gallifrey and Earth. Like he's not from either country. But the war or country, other world. The warlord is not Gallifreyan. He's not human, but the war chief is Gallifreyan.
so
Um,
just to clarify,
yeah.
um, that we have the war chief, and
Yep.
then we have a Time Lord who in the expanded universe pseudo canon has been called Adelphi. I don't, if I recall correctly, he was never named on screen. So the canon of that name, neither here nor there. But that is the Time Lord that's like teaming up with the War Chief, if I recall. Um, no, he was the one that sentenced the shoot. No, Adelphi was the one who sentenced the Doctor to exile, and then there was another unnamed Time Lord that was in league with the War Chief.
Right.
This is why it's so confusing.
Yes. Let's not talk about the confusing parts.
So
Um, Something else
I
kind of cool about this episode that I forgot and is not in our notes, but David Troughton, who is Patrick Troughton's son, he was in the episode or in the story. I can't remember who he is in the story, but he is one of the um he was in Enemy of the World as well. Um and he appeared a few times in Doctor Who, but it's kind of cool
wait,
that
is
he
that the
was
same child that was in
no, I
Peter
don't
Capaldi's
think
Christmas
that
episode?
no, because I think that's Michael Troughton, not David Troughton. Uh-huh. We're moving on.
Moving on,
Yeah, he was
moving on.
so in the War Games itself, again, you've got this like long story, but it was hard. It was like a long book that you didn't want to put down. Like for me, I was dreading the War Games for two reasons.
Yeah,
One, I love Patrick Troughton, and two, I really didn't want to go through 10 episodes. And I had a couple opportunities over time. One point, Hulu had Doctor Who, and I could have sat and watched it then. Um, and it was on there, unlike Netflix, and it's very limited. Hulu was less limited in what it had.
yeah.
And I really was like, I don't feel like watching it. I just didn't really want to watch a long one. And it, as much as I don't like where it ends, I really like the way that the story,
It progressed so well.
it did. It was impressive. I mean,
Like
there's a slowness in
yeah, I mean it's
the
10
first three
episodes.
episodes, but that slowness still holds a contained
Mhm.
story that you get that
Well, I
has
mean,
its,
you start
you're
with
not
that
looking at
mind
10, you look
fog
at,
that you start with the mind fog that to me was like reminiscent of Once Upon a Time, but like people
mhm.
couldn't even process like, oh, the war has been going on for how long? Oh, I don't know. And just slowly people started like realizing like something's not right here, something's not right here.
Well, and they were from the wrong era and everything.
Yeah,
Like
they
they
started
weren't
like
all from.
finding people from other eras, and then they found another TARDIS, and it just
Hmm.
all over the place from there.
Yeah, it was
Um,
really everywhere, but it was a
oh,
really good everywhere.
and also somewhere along the lines, the sonic screwdriver drove screws for the probably the first and last time.
Probably. Well, yeah, I think the third Doctor did something with it, but and a
But did it?
screw. I don't
But did
remember.
he? But did his screwdriver drive screws?
No, that's what I was thinking. I thought I remember something being twirled in and out, but again, it's I might just only remembering the one from the War Games. So, but again, it was really just using a screwdriver. It was using a screwdriver as a screwdriver without actually touching the screw. Like that's all it was. And but
Yep.
it's like, and it's turned into this. I'm going to aim it at something and blow something up. Like, you know, the War Doctor says you build cabinets with it. You don't do all these other things with it. Well, at the same time, if it's been progressing in its software over years, then why not? You know. Of
Yep.
course,
Yep.
the doctor just doesn't want to un unloose the screws. Apparently, he just does other things. So
Just point and think.
point and think, and that's got it. Um, but there's other aspects about the war games that makes it kind of a cool story.
How about the tragic ending with the companions and the doctor?
That I hate that ending. Just because it's a it's a sad ending because
But
it's
in
they
some
lose their
ways,
memories, but they go back to where they were.
it's kind of like until the 60th anniversary, it would have been like with Donna, where it's this tragic ending, but that's so beautifully written.
Hmm.
Um, because Jamie and Zoe, which we'll delve into in our next Doctor Who episode, have no idea that they ever traveled with the Doctor. They remember their first encounter with the Doctor, nothing
And
else.
that's it.
So the Doctor's best friends don't even remember he existed after that point, basically. He
Yeah,
was
they
just
know
this
they
one
have no history
encounter,
with him.
so many adventures, and that they
Well, and
can't remember.
not just that, but like Jamie, so Jamie and Zoe, they lose their memories of their time with the Doctor. The Doctor loses his memories as well. Like he doesn't lose everything, but he does lose some of his memory.
None of his
In the
companions.
well, not I'm not saying everything, but he does lose his memory of certain things, and
Well, I mean,
it's
he
there's
can't
still
fly
some
the
sadness
TARDIS
to
in
it.
the third Doctor era. That's odd.
Yeah, it does feel like he doesn't have much of a memory, and that could just be a regeneration time thing where he's regenerating into the third Doctor still, and it takes its time. But I kind of got the impression that there were other things he's forgotten that he can't remember exactly
There is also the theory that in the between his exile and his
between two
trial,
and three.
yeah,
Yeah.
between two and three, there's this theory that you know the two doctors from the sixth Doctor era and the five doctors from the fifth Doctor's era kind of take place in this time period, like right before he's forced to regenerate. The Time
Yep.
Lords have sent him on a mission or two in
Yep.
that time period before sending Jamie and Zoe back, before banishing him to Earth.
Well, they've banned it for the fifth Doctor. For the five Doctors, it would have been that they had already been banished because they're in the five Doctors. The Jamie and Zoe only appear as
Like hallucinations
their
in the death zone.
hallucinations. Yep.
But in
Uh,
the
But
in
in
the
the second
sixth,
Doctor,
yeah, the two
in the
doctors.
second Doctor, in the two Doctors, it could have been any time for him and Jamie though, because there are a couple points where he and Jamie are like Polly Ben and Polly leave and then they go find Victoria and then Victoria leaves and they go get
I guess
Zoe. So
that's true.
there's a gap there for both of those
But
to
there's still
work
the theory that it takes place in this, time between
in this unknown
regeneration.
time. Yeah.
There's also the theory that the fugitive doctor from the 13th Doctor era
Yep.
could be from
That
this
she
spot
goes
as
in
well,
between.
which
Her
would,
TARDIS works.
yeah, and her TARDIS is stuck as a police box,
Yeah.
which would critics of The Timeless Child, that kind of fits well for them, that,
Yep.
you know, this isn't a doctor from before the first doctor. This is a doctor from in between with the same TARDIS, with the,
And that's why she's the
and
fugitive, because they
yeah,
forced him to change into her, and then they eventually forced her to change into the third Doctor. I mean, that would work storyline. I mean, it's Doctor Who; they can do whatever the crap they want. Come
I
on.
mean, the toy maker did say to the 14th Doctor that he like made a mess of the the jigsaw puzzle of his history, or have
Mm-hmm.
rephrased it. So it's, you know, we were led to believe the fugitive Doctor came before it all, but
Be after it all. Who knows?
yeah, we or in the middle of, you know, wibbly wobbly and all that.
Yep. I honestly, I watch Doctor Who and enjoy it. I'm not going to tell them how to tell their story. Like it's
Yep.
somebody else's. I don't tell an author how to write their book. Unless they kill off characters I like, then I get mad. But that's
Yeah.
different. And Doctor Who kills off enough characters that I like anyway. So I mean, I'm used
Just
to it with
numb to
them.
it.
It's not a big deal there. But for being a 10 episode story, it didn't feel like a 10 episode
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Which it's the second longest story, and I think it's remains that way. It is the second longest story, at least from a individual story standpoint, as well as at least in classic Doctor Who. If you're going to count minutes from it, I don't know if
Mhm.
it
The only
if
things that might compare is if you counted the Key to Time or Trial of the Time Lord as one story each, but both of those could be divided up into individual stories of
which they are, and
4 to 6 episodes. So
I mean
it's
they
just
already
an
are in that.
overarching plot.
Yeah, so from classic Doctor Who, from a storyline or from a minutes standpoint, I don't think that anything beats. Only one beats this one in time.
And that was the
Which is
Daleks Master Plan, I believe.
Yep, the Daleks Master Plan with the in the third season of the first Doctor. And in modern Doctor Who, you can kind of say that Flux beats it, and that's the only one that I know of that would potentially beat it, because that was a single 6 episode story, but each story was its own episode. This was, and again, you can even point out to this one saying this is an 8 episode story and a 2 episode story put as one. So
Yeah.
kind of hard
I'm
to.
even just thinking with the flux, even that, you're right, it could be 6 individual stories. It's
Yep.
6 1 part stories, or is it 1 6 part story?
Yeah,
Wibbly wobbly.
it is very timey-wimey there. But I do, I mean,
I
from
feel
a
like this one
Doctor
kept my
Who.
attention more than the Daleks Master Plan, but maybe that's just because this one still exists.
Well, and I think it also kept my attention better than Flux. I'm going to be honest with that. Um, but also I was watching Flux 1 episode at a time. So
Yeah, it'll be a
I
while till we
I
get
don't
back
know.
to the flux, so who knows?
But I do think that the even with the sadness, going in knowing that the Doctor's gonna get separated, forced into regeneration, um, knowing that is gonna happen. I mean, I've seen the scene a few times before, just in random other things, and then knowing that Jamie and Zoe are gonna lose their memory. Um, it's so well written that it's hard to ignore that it is a really good episode or a
Mhm.
really good story. And again, the nice thing about it is that while they wrap up a lot of different pieces to it, they wrap it up beautifully by bringing back full circle with one of these the main villain in a way in the storyline is Gallifreyan, is somebody with a TARDIS, and that just that aspect of it I think adds so much to the whole thing.
Mhm.
And again, it's really, we're gonna
We're gonna get
see
a lot more
another
Gallifrey in
Time
the
Lord in a
next.
little bit, but we'll
We got
but
three
it's
more
it's
second
it,
Doctor episodes before we do that.
yeah, we'll get there. But I think that it's, for me, it's a good thing to have this one as a because we didn't have the 10th planet, I don't think, with the first Doctor, and so I like that we have the final episode of the second Doctor, because I think firsts and finals are really important with Doctor Who, especially nowadays.
Mhm.
And I think this was a really good final episode for the second Doctor. And again, he comes back in 3 more classic Doctor Who stories. So, but
Any
that's it, I think.
any further thoughts on the second Doctor stories or the War Games?
I do think it was a little difficult to pare it down to 5 for me, in the second Doctor stories, but
I feel like I
I
had a lot
like.
of like middle range
Mhm.
ones, so
And I think that there are some that people really like that I really don't. Like Tomb of the Cybermen, that's not my favorite. I thought that was a
it was
stupid story. And to be
positively
honest,
okay.
I can't even say that much about it. And it's ranked really high in like IMDb ratings.
Maybe because
Um,
for a long time that's all that was available.
it may be, I
So
don't
I
know.
think that was one of the ones that was on Netflix when Netflix only had like bits and pieces.
That is true. It wasn't like I said, it wasn't when I tried watching. Like that was not on
I
there
can't
that I
remember.
remember.
That was 10 years
But
ago.
I do remember that it was on there at some point. I just didn't watch it. Because I remember having the opportunity to have watched it at some point. But a lot of people like that one, and I gotta say, it's not to me, it's not that good. The War Games is the one that is ranked higher above it. And Power of the Daleks, which is the first Doctor story, or first second Doctor story, which is also missing, but now it's animated. It's ranked pretty high. Again, not one that I particularly care for. I don't always care for the repeated villains so much. Whereas, I mean, other than Great Intelligence
But even
in
that was like
here,
a two off villain at this point.
at this point, that was not
He was
a
more of
really
it
common
was more of a
villain.
recurring villain for the 11th Doctor.
Oh yeah, much more so. I mean, he was only in 2 stories here. Highlanders is a history that's yours more than mine by all means. I did not rank Highlanders very high though myself. Um, but the enemy of the world, that's a different villain. Web of Fear is a different villain in a way. It's also Brigadier being brought in. Mind Robber is. I still don't even know who the villain in Mind Robber is. I love the story though. And the invasion. It's a Cyberman story that I was okay with because I didn't know it was a Cyberman story until it
I
became
think
a
it's just because it
Cyberman
was the
story.
mystery of it all.
It really was. I think that's the nice thing about it is I was thinking it's a completely different force that was at work there. Um, and I don't even think that with the invasion it was even pointed out that it was Cybermen until like it was halfway through, so
Yeah,
or more.
something
And
like
War
that.
Games again. So it just I like the difference. Um, but there's a lot of good. I think the second Doctor has a lot of good stories, and it's really sad that most of them are lost to time as an actual episode to watch. I know that they are making a lot into animated versions, and that
Still a lot in the
they
time
are
work.
at least on
So
Audible or audio in some fashion
yeah,
with linking narration, most of which is performed by Jamie, but there is some that's by Polly, and I don't I don't think there's anything. I think they're all by Jamie, or Jamie's actor, um, Fraser Hines. She's I don't know why his name slipped my mind there. Most of the ones that I remember listening to were by him, and there's just a lot that's sadly missing to time. But again, if you listen to it, it's little bit better to at least have something. The TV canon.
the true canon. But that's another story.
That's another story. But I think we're good. I think I'm done here with the second Doctor because I can talk about the second Doctor way too long.
All right, sign us off then.
Oh, I get to sign us off. That's right.
You
Well,
get. I don't have a catchphrase yet, so until I have a catchphrase, I'm gonna leave it up to you.
my catchphrase is like so random. But since it is Doctor who is an alien, it is perfect. Goes with Doctor Who. Alien abductions are involuntary, but probings are scheduled.
Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. Intro and outro music was provided by David Schradell. You can follow us on most social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. You can follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.